Lär dig allt om folkrätt med katinkasvanberg och Fredrik Jörgensen på Folkrättspodden.
Welcome to Rättsakuten podcast about public international law. We are inviting the famous katinkasvanberg, expert on this topic, back onto our podcast. Welcome, Katinka.
Thank you so much, Fredrik. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, you are right now a guest scholar at the University of West Virginia in Morgantown. Is that right?
Yeah, at the law school there, College of Law.
Teaching, yeah?
Yeah, I'm teaching a class on international security and the Ukraine war.
All right. And to this end, we're going to have a few questions asked to you by me about the war between Israel and the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And we're going to start with this one. Was the attack of Hamas an armed attack?
Yeah, because international terrorism after the 9/11 attacks, that was a shock to the US when the World Trade Center and the Pentagon was attacked in 2001. That was seen as an armed attack, falling under Article 51 in the UN Charter, which gives a right to self-defense against armed attacks. But that article really is concerned with armed attacks by armed forces from one state against another state's territory. So when terrorists, they are individuals, when they make a terrorist deed, it has to be really a large-scale terrorist attack to classify being kind of analogous, the same as an armed attack with conventional weapons made by the state's ordinary regular forces. But actually international law has accepted large-scale terrorist attacks that amounts to the same type of forceful attacks, with the result killing like thousands of people, being deemed to be an armed attack under Article 51. So actually the scope of Article 51 has enlarged and have seen terrorist attacks become armed attacks, the same, being classified as armed attacks under Article 51, giving rights to self-defense. And that's what happened, in Israel. The Hamas attack had killing over 1,000 people in a day. That's kind of the result is as a war. And that's why the response by Israel is okay, seeing this as an armed attack directed from abroad. That's the other question. Was it directed from abroad? Gaza, is that a state? Coming to the next question, maybe.
Do the Palestinians have the right to self-determination and a state of their own?
Yeah, because coming back to the last question was, does Gaza qualify as a territory, as a state? I mean, no, they just have a limited self-government after the Oslo Accords in 1993 that Israel made with other states. So Gaza is on its way to self-determination, and several states have accepted the Palestinian government as a self-government and on their way to independence, and at the end their own Palestinian state. That's the two-state solution that we hear about. But no, today they're not qualifying as an independent state, but they are a self-governing territory with limited self-governance. So the problem is, was that attack from Hamas from the Gaza territory launched coming into Israel over the border from Gaza? Was it really a terrorist attack directed from abroad? If Gaza, the Gaza territory does belong to Israel still? That's a hard question.
Well, I think the main question is what kind of territory is Gaza to begin with? If we go way back, I think it's actually Egypt, right?
Yeah,
then,
it's actually Egypt. It has belonged to Egypt, and then Israel has occupied Gaza since the 1967 war, if I'm not wrong. And so it has been a very prolonged occupation. And that occupation, when you occupy a territory according to the Geneva Conventions, you only have a right to make the occupation for a short period of time, and you should actively guide the territory back to self-government and independence, or give it back to the state where it belonged before. That's why, you know, that's if it's an illegal occupation by the use of force, you should actually, as Russia, when they occupy parts of Ukraine, give back those territories immediately, ending the illegal occupation. But here it's a bit more complicated. Anyway, they should guide the Gaza Strip back to independence and to become a known state. But that hasn't happened. So, well, many states, some states do have recognized Gaza as a kind of independent territory with a right to their own state. So one could stretch Article 51 to say that it was kind of directed not from another state, but from an international territory, an occupied territory that doesn't really belong to Israel. But that's not how Israel sees it. It sees that Gaza is part of Israel.
I think Margot Wallström, the Swedish Minister of Foreign Affairs, she she declared Palestine an independent state in 2014.
Yeah, I mean, we have recognized them, and also President Joe Biden from the US president said that he's for the two-state solution, and he recognized the civilian in Gaza, the right, you know, to security, and talking about the two-state solution. But Israel has not accepted it. But we could also see that also Hamas, the terrorists, they were also supported since many years by Iran. And Iran is that's an international connection. So, I mean, those could be seen as international terrorists supported by other states. And that could make for an international terrorist attack as well. There are some international connections, and there's actually the border between Gaza and Israel. So, well, it has been seen as an international terrorist attack, and it was so large scale that it amounted to actually an armed attack that belongs under Article 51 in the UN Charter, giving rise to a right to self-defense against the international terrorists and those who aid and abet them, helping them. And that would be the government in Gaza, but not the civilians, of course.
All right, so how about the next question? It goes like this. Does Israel have the right to a full-scale military intervention in Gaza as a response to the terrorist attack killing of over 1,000 Israelis?
Yeah, as we said, as they do have a right to self-defense, and that has also US President Biden said, and the UK Prime Minister, lots of states, and also the Prime Minister, the Chancellor in Germany, Schulz, have said this gave rise to right to self-defense for Israel. And Israel will carry out its self-defense with its own armed forces. So that's a kind of, so when you have a right to self-defense as a state, you will use your own armed forces. And then the right to self-defense is only limited by some rules of international humanitarian law. That is proportionality and necessity, those principles. And that you could not harm civilians. You only have to target target military targets. That's a target military targets. And you should not target
long
civilians.
Answer. We have a final question to you. And it goes like this. How can Israel free the hostages that are held by Hamas in the Gaza Strip?
Lär dig allt om folkrätt med Katinkasvanberg och Fredrik Jörgensen på Folkrättspodden.